Hey budget gardeners, Vita Loca here. Join me today as I give you an early August garden tour. So let's go. Before I start the garden tour, I wanted to take a moment to thank each of you for watching my videos, for commenting on my videos, and if you have subscribed to my channel, thank you for that. Also, if you are enjoying this type of content, please consider sharing my channel with other friends who you think might also enjoy this type of content. I truly love making videos that inspire you, where you can learn different things like how to winter sow, how to collect the seeds of plants. I'm a home gardener that really enjoys gardening on a budget, which means stretching the dollar by starting my own plants from seed, by dividing plants in my yard. But then I also take pride in sharing whatever I've learned over the last 30 years with each of you. So if you have any questions or comments, as always, please drop them down in the comment section below. I hope you enjoy this tour. We're going to start the tour on the west side of my house, which is my front yard. This flower bed right here is called the bay window flower bed. You can see there's a bay window there, and I'm going to show you close up anything that's blooming right now. There's a bunch of a perennial geranium called cranesbill geranium. Now, this is a geranium that bloomed early on in the season, and then it became kind of leggy. So I had made a video showing you my process for shearing it or cutting it back. And it's now putting on a second flush of blooms. I also made a video showing you my process for dividing the plant. I'll be sure to link those videos down in the description below in case you're interested. But I really do love this perennial, and I plan on continuing to divide it and move it around my yard. It really makes for a nice ground cover towards the front of a flower bed. I cut my Stelladoro daylilies back pretty hard, and they are starting to put out a second flush of blooms. Now I could come in here and clean up some of the old growth, but I'm not going to bother. This time of year, I'm happy that they are shorter so that other things around them can really shine. And I'm pleased with the extra yellow flowers that I get from these reblooming daylilies. You can see that the pollinators are still all over my speedwell or my veronica. I really love this plant, and pretty soon I'm going to be coming in and deadheading this plant so that it puts out a new flush of growth. And I'm also going to be coming in here and dividing and moving this plant to other areas of my garden. Lots of maintenance to be done this time of year. I need to come in and deadhead my spirea, but you can see it still has a little bit of pink flowers that are blooming on the plant. This Annabelle hydrangea has only been here for a year or maybe 2 years. So each year it's going to put on more and more growth. And right near it at the base, I recently planted some echinacea or coneflower. I winter sowed these a few years ago, so this is the first year that they're blooming. I really love their colors. They're all a little different from each other. At my front porch, you can see I have some container pots here, and they are in their glory. These are all plants that I either started from seed or plants that I overwintered in my garage because they're not hardy in my zone. Here's lysimachia. It may be hardy in my zone, I'm not quite sure. I did overwinter it last year. I had gotten just a small cutting of it, and I was able to root it and turn it into a ton of free plants. Also in this pot are a bunch of impatiens, beacon impatiens. Every year I collect my own seeds from my beacon impatiens, and then I'm able to just keep growing the plants, and that's why they're all different colors. I have videos showing how to collect the seeds of a lot of these plants that I'm showing you today. I also have videos showing you how to start these plants from seed. I'll be sure to put links to all of those videos down in the description below. This is a great time of year to be collecting seeds from annuals as well as perennials, and even herbs and vegetables. Tucked in here is a yellow tuberous begonia. This was my first year starting that from seeds that I collected from a plant last year. and I'm very happy. This plant has done extremely well for me. This right here is a seed pod of the tuberous begonia. I can't wait until it's seed collecting time. It's almost here. Both window boxes have lysimachia in them and a ton of impatiens. Although I say a ton, there might only be 6 plants in each of them, but they have really filled in nicely. See these guys right here? Those are the seed pods. So I'll be collecting the seeds soon enough. Do you remember when we first planted these wax begonias that I had started from seed? They have really filled in, and they just look so beautiful around the pond. And you can see here that they are starting to go to seed. A lot of people don't realize that there are hosta that are called miniature or mini hosta that you can buy. You usually won't find them at many of the local garden centers, but if you do a search on the internet, there are websites where you can buy mini hostas or even small sized hostas. I love them tucked around my pond. However, they also would look super sweet inside of a container pot. You could even do like a fairy garden with them. And that pink flower, in case you're wondering, that's called vinca, and it is absolutely thriving around the pond. I love the pink color that it provides in this space. Many areas of my yard need regular maintenance. I'll be getting to them as I go one flower bed at a time. I have some sedge grass in here. There's a hosta. There's also heucheras tucked in here. If I was more diligent, I would have a lot more of these plants blooming right now. In case you're wondering what it is, it's called an English daisy. I had winter sown them a few years ago, and they really spread quite a bit, which I don't mind them doing in this part of my garden. In case you're wondering what this is, we recently added this around the pond. It's a miniature size lady's mantle, and you can see how small it is next to my hands. It is super sweet and very cute. I love that plant. Even though I was late to the game with getting my impatiens and my lobelia planted up along the walkway, you can see that they have finally taken off. And I have a repeating pattern of the blue and the white all the way down the walkway. And it just looks so pretty this time of year. And then I also have a lot of the vinca, the pink and the white colors. And all of these annuals were started from seed, and they were seeds that I collected last season. Inside the pots are dahlias. I need to come in and I just need to do regular maintenance of deadheading. My plan for this fall is to do some work along my walkway. On the right-hand side are 3 rather large rhododendrons, and for the last many years, I've cut them back year after year. It's a lot of maintenance. Instead, we will be pulling them out, putting them elsewhere in my yard, and I'm not sure what I'm going to add there instead, but I'm thinking possibly a lavender hedge, because I started a lot of lavender from seed during the winter months. Last year, I had snapdragons in this bed, and there's a little volunteer snapdragon. It's a little leggy, but I do love the color. I was very late in planting a lot of my plants this year, including my dahlias, but you can see they're putting on some color, and I'm okay with that. Every year is different in our garden. Some years are better than others. This year, I was definitely late in getting dahlias in, but I'm happy I got in whatever I did because I'm enjoying them and so are the pollinators. I had made a video recently showing you my process for just limbing up this hydrangea here. Now, this area definitely does not get enough sun for this hydrangea, but it is providing a little bit of sun, so there are some blooms on it. And what we did was, after we limbed it up, we also removed a ton of perennials from this bed, and we just added some different plants under here. And I'm really, really pleased with how it's looking. And check out all those alyssum and coleus. They really are happy in this spot. And that's good for me to know for next year, because I really do want to get in the habit of adding annuals that I start from seed out into the landscape. I love them in pots, but I equally love them in the landscape. You can see there's heuchera at the base of the hydrangea, and then there's a type of sedge or a carex, and that's what the grassy texture is. We also added some heuchera at the base of the tree there, and that's thriving. It's looking nice. We added some astilbe towards the back of this bed, and I did notice that there's some new growth there, and the whole purpose of planting it there was to see how it will look next spring. That will be the true test if the astilbe is happy in this area. Gardening is always an experiment, and I had planted a bunch of these begonias, wax begonias, down in this area here. There are buds on them, but they're not putting on a great show. I'll show you somewhere else in my yard where the same begonia is planted. It all has to do with lighting. Certain plants just need more light than other plants. And I'm almost sure that's what's going on with those begonias, is that they are not getting enough sun here. So next year, this video will be a good reminder for me to not plant wax begonias here, and instead maybe try some more impatiens. Perhaps those will pop in that area, because after all, they're thriving right next door over here. We recently worked on this flower bed over here. It was lacking in color, so we added some black-eyed Susan or rudbeckia that I moved from another part of my yard. And just look how happy they look there. And you can only imagine, come next year and then the year after, that area right there is going to fill right in. It's going to look so pretty. We added some sedum, small sedum, right over there. That's the autumn joy sedum. We're going to see how all these plants do that we just added. This is kind of like the year of getting the roots established. Next year will be the trial year. And I'm not going over every plant in the bed. I'm just focusing on anything that's blooming right now. We have some perennial alliums that we recently added in the bed. And then right beneath this lilac tree, we added a bunch of impatiens, just to add a little pop of color in this bed. And that was enough for me for this year to get some color in here. We did have some wax begonias towards the front, and if you come in close with me, you'll see that they are adding some color in here, which is nice. I got them in late, so we have to keep that in mind. Had I gotten these plants in earlier, they would have been putting on a better show. But better late than never is what I say. as we make our way to the other side of the bed, you can see that nice pop of color again, and that's where we added more of the goldstrum rudbeckia, or black-eyed Susan. And I showed you in that video how to divide the rudbeckia. So that's what that is, are a bunch of small little baby plants. And those will take off by next year. This year has been the year of one flower bed at a time. And together we worked on this flower bed here. And I think it's really coming along nicely. Towards the front, we had divided a bunch of lambs here. That's why they're very small. A lot of the plants were just plants that I shopped my own yard, because there's really no need to buy plants if you have enough in your yard that you can shop from. So in my plant nursery, there were a bunch of plants, like this one here. This is a echinacea, or coneflower. And there were a lot of plants in my plant nursery that I winter sowed, and this was their first year blooming. And you'll notice at the base of this bed, it's just more of the wax begonias that I started from seed. There's a hydrangea that I planted here last year, and that's really looking pretty, adding a nice pop of color into this bed. I'm really enjoying it. And each year it's just going to get bigger and stronger. So this bed really did not have a lot in it. And I came in here and added the purple coneflower echinacea, as well as the begonias. And that really added color, because the only thing that was blooming at that time was this one patch of echinacea, and that's it. There's a green twister echinacea. Again, these were all winter sown from a few years ago. So just imagine in another year or 2 years, all these echinacea that we added recently are just going to be bigger and stronger. As we move our way this way, at the base of this birch tree, I planted some hosta. It was either last year or the year before last, and it's really filled in. I really enjoy planting things at the base of trees. We have so many trees in my yard that I just think it's kind of a fun, whimsical thing to do, to just plant around the tree a ring of some sort of plant. And this bed right next door to that tree, we recently worked on as well. And again, a lot of what I'm working on this time of year is getting ready for next year. So even though there might not be a lot blooming in here, it's ready to go. It's cleaned up. It's, as you might know, I like my beds to be a little bit symmetrical. So it's a little symmetrical the way I like it in terms of the plantings. I left a gap right there because I'm going to be putting a boxwood in that area that I'll be moving from another part of my yard. And the reason I want to do that is I want it to be symmetrical with this boxwood that's here. So there are some sedum that are going to be blooming soon. I divided them, and they're pretty new sedum, so they'll be putting on a better show over the next few years. There's another type of sedum over there. We had planted, see that red color flower? We planted that recently, and that's called the cardinal flower. It's a type of lobelia. And I had winter sown that plant, so this was the first year that that plant bloomed. And I think it's just so pretty. I really love this plant. And at the base of the lobelia is a very beautiful purple colored plant. The name is escaping me right now, so I'm going to put it up on the screen. I had bought it this year, and I deadheaded it, so it should be sending out new blooms very soon. But it's super pretty. So you remember I said I'm working on one flower bed at a time. As we move in this direction, we're basically headed towards my backyard. Now, this area is not extremely weedy, but I have a story to tell you. Mr. Budget Gardener and I are working on flower beds together. I mostly do the moving around of plants. He does some of the weeding, I do some of the weeding. And after we've done all that, then he puts in the drip irrigation, and then together we put mulch down. So this is the next flower bed to work on. And we typically go from one tree to another. So we have a tree over here, and on the other side of the bed, we have a tree over here. So pretty much that's the next bed that we're going to work on. And when you chunk out the work like that, it just makes it a little bit easier to be able to work on. And when we also work on a bed like that, we look at the trees, and you can see this right here needs to be cut because it is providing shade in this area. And personally, I'd like a little more sun in that flower bed. So we will come in and we'll just limb up this tree just to provide a little bit more sun to this flower bed. And then we can technically call that flower bed done. I don't really show a lot of my backyard this year because honestly, it's pretty overgrown, pretty weedy. And that's the reality, I think, of gardening is some years our flower beds are beautiful and other years, some of them just go by the wayside, and that's okay. That's all part of our journey. This right here is wild ginger. I love it. I think it looks really nice around the trees. It looks pretty tucked in a woodland garden. And also in a shady or woodland garden, other than hosta and other than heuchera. Another plant, if you look at the little fern-like leaves right over there, that's called Jacob's ladder. So if you have a shady yard or a shady part of your garden, Jacob's ladder is so beautiful for its leaves, but it also has a very pretty blue-colored flower during the early spring months. What I do want to point out about this flower bed, other than the beautiful heuchera that are towards the front of the bed, is notice the pattern of just two types of hosta. Not just the leaf pattern, but also the colors. I really enjoy that when sometimes you do something simple like taking two types of hosta and mixing them in an area. I think sometimes it has a greater impact than having a ton of different kinds of hosta in one area. And I especially love that light green color. I think it pops in a dark spot of the yard. Here we are at what I call the rose garden. This is where my kids' above ground pool used to be. And the roses had put on a flush of color initially in the season. And then there was a lull. I came in, I deadheaded the roses, I gave them some fertilizer, and they are looking beautiful again. And some of them still need deadheading again, but that's okay. This type of rose is called a drift rose. I bought this probably on clearance at like a big box store. And I really do like drift roses. They just have so many blossoms on them when they bloom. Just really, really pretty. And see these pink roses? These came from my mother-in-law's home. They're called a knockout rose. Again, you can find these, I'd call them common roses, at big box stores. But I love them. I think they're very pretty. This year, I definitely had a lot of issues with the Japanese beetles. And you can see them inside that rose there. And so one thing I'm going to be trying, and I'm almost sure I tried this a long time ago, was using a product called Milky Spores. And it's not harmful to any other insect but the Japanese beetle. And I want to be able to control the Japanese beetles because they really did a job on my roses this year. And they're also doing quite a job on my lawn, I'm almost sure of it. So unfortunately, they have to go. Sorry, guys. Look at the leaves on this plant. It's a very pretty yellow flower. I call it bidens. Some people call it bidens. But it's an annual here where I live, but it does drop its seeds. And so I ended up with some freebie plants, and I left them there because I knew that my rose garden doesn't have a lot of yellow in it. And I'm glad I did because I think it just adds a nice pop of yellow in this flower bed. I have irrigation and it sprays on my flower bed. So the roses, their leaves tend to get a little bit rusty color. But look how pretty these roses are. Roses are definitely, I would call it a high maintenance plant. But you know, I really enjoy them and I'm so thankful I have this rose garden in my yard. Look at the bud on this one. It makes you wonder, what is the flower going to look like when it blooms? Because it's just such a pretty rose bud color to it. And these roses are going by, but you can see they're like a very pretty light purple color. And down at the base, see the white blossoms? Those are wax begonias that I started from seed. I got placed in this garden very late. And I cut them way back at the time because they were leggy. But you know what? I'm really enjoying them right now. I think they look really pretty in this flower bed. They just add that little pop of white color in the center of the bed. That's why I feel like it's never too late to plant your annuals if you still have them. Now here's a really pretty rose again that needs to be deadheaded, but it is also a drift rose. And just look at the colors on the petals here. And I'm really enjoying that rose specifically next to all of these begonias that I planted here. And I know I mentioned there's not a lot of yellow in this bed. There isn't. However, let's just admire the yellow rose that's in here. Really, really pretty. I'm really hoping that this is the year that we tackle the vegetable garden. The wood is falling apart. We've had this vegetable garden for many, many years. And it also was built too large. We need to make it smaller. Optimally, we might have 3 or 4 raised beds, and each one will just be smaller in size, preferably 3 or 4 feet in dimension. The asparagus in the center of the bed is looking great. We need to leave it there as it feeds the roots. And then in the fall, I'll come in, I'll cut it back, and I'll give it some compost, and we'll top dress it just to protect it from the winter. And we recently added some more green beans. We're pretty sure that we can get one more crop of green beans, so they haven't come up yet, but they'll be at the base of the asparagus plants. And we really have been harvesting a lot from our cucumbers this year. It's been a great year for the cucumbers. Between the heat that we've had and all the rain that we've had. Well, we didn't have a ton of rain to start with, but lately we're getting a lot of rain. We were having to water this plant quite a bit to start with. But this is a fun way to trellis your cucumbers. So you can pick the cucumbers from the other side. I don't stand in my way back part of my yard very often, but I want to kind of give you an idea of what we're looking at here. We do have quite a bit of lawn, And I could put flower beds out here or a vegetable garden, but honestly, we have so many beds to tend to that it's not in the cards, at least anytime soon, maybe never. There are flower beds at the perimeter of my yard in the backyard that I kind of sort of started, never really finished, and those will all be part of my one flower bed at a time project, which will have to go into next year, and that's okay. So there's a lot of great opportunity back here. But you can see that it's a very, very wooded lot. We do get a lot of deer pressure, so those are things that I need to take into consideration when I'm working on flower beds back here. And I'm thinking it doesn't need to be anything fancy, it just needs to be something pretty. In the springtime on this side of my yard, there were a ton of daffodils that bloomed. And also in that flower bed there are a bunch of daylilies, there are a bunch of peonies. But you can see that there are a lot of trees. So it's really not the most optimal place to plant plants like that. So those are areas that, again, will be tackled eventually. But the good news is there are plants in there for the picking. I can come shop my yard and move those plants to other parts of my yard. And optimally, that's the way I like to work. I like to take out plants and redo a whole bed. I feel like I can work around those plants better if they're removed and then get right into the bed and work on it. Because there are a lot of beautiful plants in here. You just can't really see them. Lots of daylilies, lots of peonies. In between the daylilies and peonies, there are a ton of spring bulbs that I planted here as temporary holding spots, and well, they're still in there. That's okay. But I think it's good for you to see the reality of my yard. There are spots just like everyone else's yard that needs to be worked on. And there are things in these areas that are beautiful. So on a different day, if I can come out here, I can possibly pull out this white liatris or gayfeather. I could come out here. Peekaboo, I see you. I have that beautiful purple flower, and that is called the balloon flower. There are some tall phlox in here. There's a white one and there's a pink one. What do you think? Do you want me to take you along sometime and we can go shopping in this area and pull out some plants and find some treasures? Let me know in the comments below. I won't be offended if you don't want to watch that. But if you do, we'll have fun with it. So there's the rose garden. That's my back porch. And up there, that's my bedroom, and there's a balcony off the bedroom. I'm thinking for next year, we're going to do a series of videos that talks about how to garden on a balcony. I think there are a lot of people that could benefit and know how to have a small space garden on a balcony. And we're going to use that balcony. And we're going to grow vegetables, we're going to grow flowers. And maybe I'll even bring you along so we can power wash that area, because it really needs to be power washed. As we go this way, we come back to greener pastures where it's a little bit cleaner. You can see it. So again, with the one flower bed at a time, it ended here, and it goes all the way to the back of the backyard. This area is on the east side of my house, and it gets quite a bit of shade. And there are a bunch of plants in here. Again, there are some begonias I started from seed. There are coleus that I started from seed. And then there are just a bunch of different perennials. Lots of heuchera, astilbe, a coneflower grass. We have the stachys betony, the humillo version of it. There is a sun king over there, which honestly I'd like to come in and divide that. I think that would be a good one to try to divide. There is lungwort, which are the spotted leaves over here. So there are quite a few plants, and all the plants that I just mentioned, for the most part, repeat themselves. It's quite a bit of a pattern that goes on back here. And remember I mentioned I like to plant things around my trees. Last year I planted this small hosta around this tree. It's puny. I really need to add more to it. I just don't have enough of that hosta. So what I really should do is come like to this area here, thin it out a tiny bit, and move some of that to this tree, because I really want to make a full ring around the tree. And hopefully next year that should fill in nicely. The deer have been coming in, not recently, but earlier on in the season, and they were eating some of the hosta. So I'm playing around with sprinkling Irish Spring soap. It seems to be working, but I want to give it 1 year before I can tell you that it works for sure. And then that right there is called foam flower. It's a type of tiarella. And in case you're wondering what a tiarella is, it's kind of like a heuchera and a heucherella. They're all related. They're all kind of crosses or hybrids of each other. Like that's an example of a heuchera over there. But I love the leaves on the lungwort. A lot of people say, what is that spotted hosta? And that's what that is. It's lungwort or pulmonaria, and it had such a beautiful bloom in the early spring months. We have some astilbe. So you can see that there are a lot of things that bloom at different times of the year. I had shown you in a previous video me dividing this little tiny plant over here, and that's a dwarf goat's beard. So that blooms in the early spring. But what I really like about it is that it just adds that cute little ferny texture to the front of a flower bed. And you know, I'm really proud of this area of my yard because I think it's really hard sometimes to have a pretty garden space in a shady area. I love showing people this spot of my yard. I have a fern over there and a hydrangea in the back. That's the Annabelle hydrangea. And I have a few of them. We added those together when we worked on this bed. And then another plant that looks like an astilbe, but it's not, is the goat's beard. It's a larger size goat's beard. And that's what is over there. But I'm always trying to play with color, texture, plants that bloom at different times of the year. I think that's really important in any garden space, not just a shady garden space. And the key with, I think, any garden space is to take whatever you have and try to keep dividing and moving those plants. That's the name of the game. That really just increases the stock in your plants in your yard. And perennials definitely want to be divided every 3 to 5 years in order for the plants to keep blooming and be healthy, strong, and vigorous. You can see these little hosta are blooming right now. And on a lot of my trees, other than putting plants at the base of them, the other thing I like to do is play with the vertical interest aspect. And I like to add hanging baskets to them. And the hanging baskets are getting a little tired, but they're looking okay. They have, again, impatiens. You can see I just repeat plants that I started from seed. And also there's creeping jenny, which is a type of lysimachia, and that's a perennial here where I live. And it's always nice to be able to fill your container pots with annuals that you bought or you started from seed, couple those with perennials that are hardy in your zone. So the perennial that I'm using here also is a lamium, and I should come in and deadhead it. And if I do that, it puts out little blossoms like this. And you can see that I have them lining all of the trees here. I'm very happy with the impatiens that I added in this bed, as well as even the impatiens that I added down along this bed here, and the begonias. I think that the annuals added a nice pop of color. And this was my first year really going hard with adding annuals in my landscape. And in this bed, there are a bunch of different things. We have the Japanese painted fern, which is looking so beautiful. And then there are some epimediums tucked in here. I had only bought one, but then I was able to divide it into 3, if not 4 pieces. And then there are some different shades of heuchera that I divided this year. So they're very, very small. And then over here, as well as tucked in over there, is hellebore or Lenten rose. I'll be dividing those soon. I'll show you your process for dividing those. I divided some last year, and now I just keep increasing my stock. I really like to divide them every year. And then this plant here, I find very intriguing, very interesting. And there's one of those same plants over here. And it's called ligularia, or bottle rocket. It already bloomed, but look how huge this is. It was a bright yellow color flower. You would never think a plant like that should be in the shade, but absolutely, that plant thrives in the shade. I have hosta in a number of places in my yard, but this is what I specifically call my hosta garden. And you can see right here, there's like a rock wall on this side here, and I planted the same kind of hosta along that rock wall. And then inside of it, I just tucked a whole ton of hosta. Now, I never thought I'd be saying this, but I think I'm going to be doing some parts of this hosta bed over again. And let me explain what I'd like to do. There are some very large hosta. You can kind of see them. They're right towards the front of this bed. And I would say out of all the hosta in this bed, these are the largest ones. But now, keep in mind, they are towards the front of the hosta bed. I really have been adding to this bed every year. And these larger ones were some of the first ones that were in this bed. So naturally, I just put them towards the front. But I think realistically, it would look better to have larger hosta towards the back and the smaller ones towards the front. Also, I kind of feel like it might be more impactful to have groupings of the same kinds of hosta near each other. For example, maybe put 3 of these kind of near each other, 3 of these near each other. Plus, I do think they need to be divided. So I have to think about how I'm going to do it, because that's a huge undertaking. I mean, to come in here and do something like that. I think what I might end up doing is basically going through all my hosta, looking at them carefully, and if there's a hosta that I have a ton of, then I probably should divide it and sell it as part of my nursery. And the ones that I just don't have a lot of, those are the ones that I go after for dividing, and especially these big ones, getting those pushed back towards the back and dividing them up. What do you think? If you had to do this project, what do you think the strategy should be? I don't think I want to just empty out this whole bed. And the other thing is, I probably should be doing that while all the hosta are still showing their beautiful leaves. I wouldn't want to do this in the fall when they're dying back, and I wouldn't want to do this in the spring when they're just coming up, because you can't really see their leaves. So I would love some input and help on how you would do it if you were to tackle a project like that. Or do I just leave it as is? I don't know. Anyway, it's pretty and I'm enjoying it. In case you're new to my channel and you're wondering why the deer don't eat this hosta, I don't know for sure, but I believe it's because there's a structure right near this bed. And even though that's my barn, I think the deer maybe think that that's a house, so they don't come too close, which is why I really tucked the hosta all into this area here. Here in the backyard is just a wall with some large stones. So it's like a rock garden. And this is one of those areas I struggle with on what to do with it. It's a pretty narrow flower bed at the top there, so there's really not a ton I can do with it. I know one year I had iris and they did do well there, but I removed them. And then this year I put in these little begonias and I put them in late, so they are providing some color. The creeping phlox I feel is perfect for this type of location. A lot of times you see creeping phlox on a wall like this. So I think the creeping phlox is fine. However, it does tend to get a lot of grass in it because it's so close to the lawn. But I'm also trying to figure out what else I want to do for this garden, for this bed, to make it look really pretty. And if you follow it up, there's just some window boxes there. They have repeating plants as what we've already seen. So there's lysimachia, there's coleus, there are some vinca in there. Here on my side porch, the window boxes are thriving. The lysimachia that I was able to propagate just from one plant has really filled in nicely. The creeping jenny also looks really nice. I like the way that it complements the leaves. And again, the lysimachia and the creeping jenny are both different types of lysimachia, but I really like that they're a different color, a different leaf structure. And lots of annuals I started from seed. We have begonias and we have impatiens. One thing that I'm noticing during my garden tour, and I want you to take away from this too, is how certain plants do in certain areas. And these are the same repeating plants that I have. And it's good to notice that some of them thrive and do much better in some areas than they do in other areas. And those are things that I need to look back on and remember for next year when I'm coming up with what do I want to plant here and what do I want to plant there. I definitely think that the impatiens do well here on the side porch. The next year, maybe I'll just do a whole bunch of impatiens with something that's trailing down below. Although the begonia do look pretty in there, I'm not gonna lie. I'm really enjoying them. This container pot is looking beautiful with the lysimachia, with the creeping jenny. We have the begonias. We have the coleus, which I collected the seeds last year, and those were seeds I bought from Baker Creek a few years ago. Colocha rose, that's the name of that coleus. So if you're growing Colocha rose or really any coleus that goes to seed, collect the seeds of it. Collect the seeds of everything, that's what I say. The dusty miller towards the back. Lots of beautiful things going on in here. We did have some issues with drip irrigation in this pot, so this plant took a hit, but it's slowly coming back, and that's a trailing white lobelia. I'm going to show you in the next pot how much better it's looking because that pot was getting irrigation. And here's the second pot. Just look at that creeping jenny, so pretty. Everything is really thriving and doing well. One question I get about collecting seeds on the coleus is, when do you collect them? You want to wait. You want to wait until these guys turn a brown color. They are still green, so it's still too early. They will eventually turn a brown color, and once they turn brown, you can test it. Just move the pods around in your hand, and if you see little black specks, those are the seeds. But don't worry, I'm going to link down below videos that show you how to collect the seeds from all those plants, including the lobelia. See, here's the blossom right there. But if you look at the base of your lobelia plant, you see this brown color right there? Let it dry out and it will have little tiny seeds in it. I believe they're a black color. So those are what you want to collect off your lobelia plant. Here's another example right there. I tell you, the old arborvitae bed has filled in, and boy, am I enjoying it. It took a while to show its true colors, but we did what we did with it last year, was jam pack it with annuals that I started from seed. We have coleus. We have trailing blue lobelia at the base. There are a ton of different kinds of the coleus. There are a bunch of the vinca. And then in the middle of the bed are ajuga, and that's a perennial. And there are also some rhododendrons in here tucked in as a temporary holding spot. But I'm really, really pleased with how all of this is looking. Tucked in next to my garage are rudbeckia, or black-eyed Susan. It's a very, very narrow bed, and I really enjoy just having this single flower in this flower bed. Sometimes I think it can make a lot of impact when you do that. Now, one thing I'm noticing this year is the rudbeckia does need to be divided. And one way that I can tell that is by looking at this patch in here. You can see that even though there are some blooms, there are a lot of leaves. And I know last year and the previous years, this bed was flourishing. So that's usually an indicator that your perennials need to be divided when they are putting blooms, but not as many as they could be. So just keep that in mind when you're doing your gardening in your space. I just wanted to show you this hanging basket. Just look how pretty it is. It gets a little bit of sun, but it's mostly in the shade. Right near this hanging basket, up along the right side of my driveway, is my plant nursery. This is my second year with a plant nursery. I have a lot of videos talking about my plant nursery, what I sell, things that have worked, things that I hope to improve. I'll be sure to put a link to that playlist down in the description below in case you yourself have a backyard plant nursery or would like to make a plant nursery. It's been a great year. I learned a lot this year, and I'll be making some changes for next year. And as we leave the plant nursery and head up the driveway on the right, I have a bunch of things going on in here. There is a hydrangea. I don't know the type. I can tell you it's huge. And just like this hydrangea, all the hydrangea in my yard really should have been cut back hard in the springtime. That's one of my personal goals for next year. It's a lesson learned. It's just not something I'm great about, to be honest with you, but I know it needs to be done for the health of the plant. Nevertheless, it's doing well in this spot. One plant that I really, really love, and if you don't have it, you should consider getting it, is the fringed bleeding heart. A lot of people have never heard of it. Look at the leaves. They almost look like little ferns. And I have this plant in a very sunny location, and I can tell you, it does well in sun, it does well in shade. They come in a lot of different colors. The ones that I have in my yard are light pink as well as white. And if you keep it deadheaded, it will reward you with blooms spring, summer, into the fall. And I want you to notice here these wax begonias. These are thriving. They are really loving this location. This area gets a lot more sun than the other area in my yard where I have the same plant where it's not thriving. And right behind it are more of the annual vinca. And tucked behind that are more of the fringed bleeding heart. I do plan on digging up, dividing, and moving this plant in a lot of areas in my yard, especially in the shady areas. I think it would add a lot of nice interest because of its leaves. Now these flower beds are on the south side of my house, and they get a mixture of sun and shade because of a tree that's in this area. Right there are amaryllis. At the end of this month, I'll be showing you my process for bringing them into dormancy. If you get amaryllis this winter, save them, don't throw them out. You can get them to come back year after year with a little bit of care. There are a bunch of different things happening in this flower bed. You can see over here are more of the rudbeckia, black-eyed Susan. We have echinacea or coneflower. And a plant to take note of for late summer interest is the great blue lobelia. And you can see right here that it's budded up. And those are things that you want to keep in mind when you're looking at your flower beds. You want things blooming at different times of the year, and that's a great one to add. And it's also native here where I live. Towards the front of the bed are more of the lungwort or pulmonaria. And a lot of the plants that I've just mentioned repeat themselves in this bed. But I do want you to see that this great blue lobelia right here is just starting to bloom. Look how pretty that is, coupled with the coneflower. I think they make a nice pairing. In fact, I think the lobelia with the coneflower coupled with the black-eyed Susan or the echinacea over here, all three of them are really nice for this time of year if you're looking for interest in the early to mid-August months. I'm hoping to make changes to this bed because there are definitely gaps here that I want to fill. I think what happened last year was I noticed this particular long flower bed, because it is a very long flower bed, was lacking in color. So what I did last year was I came in and I added the black-eyed Susan towards the front of the bed in certain areas. I also added a bunch more of the echinacea. And I also added more of the lobelia. But the one thing that I didn't carry forward in this bed that is just now starting to go by is the bee balm. And let me tell you, the bee balm put on such a great show. The hummingbirds were all over it. And so it looks like last year I stopped at a certain point in this bed, somewhere around here. So what I'd like to do is continue that pattern as we go this way, because I think the red bee balm just looked so striking when it did bloom. The Stella d'Oro daylilies looked great when they did bloom. And last year, what we did in this flower bed was we removed alternating or every other Stella d'Oro daylily from spots in here. And I'm so glad I did that because it opened up opportunity for the black-eyed Susans. And what I want to do is actually fill in those areas with another perennial. I'm not sure which one. So what I did at that time last year was I put a black-eyed Susan here where we removed a daylily. I put a black-eyed Susan there, and then I left spots in between for another plant. And I need to look around my yard and see what I'm going to put there. But I want something that blooms during this time of year. And I'll let you know what it ends up being. It might not even be something that blooms in early to mid-August, maybe end of July. I'm thinking the liatris because I have a lot of it. The purple colored blazing star or liatris. Lots of maintenance to be done in here. I'll be coming in, I'll be cutting back the bee balm. I'll be dividing the bee balm. I'll show you my process for dividing bee balm in case you're interested in another video. There's just regular weeding to be done. And then right next to this area, you can see this beautiful hydrangea. And I don't mind that it's flopping. That's the reality of hydrangeas, especially after a lot of rain, especially if they weren't pruned in the springtime. But nevertheless, it's providing so much beautiful color here that I love. I'm really enjoying this. In fact, this particular hydrangea, I did take some cuttings of it. They've rooted, and I plan on adding this to a lot of different areas of my yard. So be on the lookout for that next year. And then right next to it is a different kind of hydrangea. And you can see the difference. You can see the difference in the colors and the type of foliage. That's more of a panicle type hydrangea. But look how pretty that is. They really are in their glory. I'm going to take you in for a closer look, just so you can see the difference between the two. Just look how bright and vibrant that is. It's really pretty this time of year. And when you move slowly this way and you look at the other type of hydrangea, you can see the color that that's putting on. And what it's going to do, it's going to be pink and then it's going to be white at the end. If you have any questions on varieties of any of the plants I'm talking about in this video, definitely drop them down in the comment section below. I'd be happy to answer them. And as we move this way, there are plants at the base. I'm not going to go over all of them, but I am going to show you that there is another hydrangea here. And one thing I want to point out, and I know I've mentioned this in other parts of my video, notice the tree canopy right above the hydrangea. That's all part of maintenance when you live in a very wooded area, is just constantly coming in here and basically taming the limbs or cutting the trees, just, cutting them up. It's very important to do. So I plan on doing a lot of that with Mr. Budget Gardener, is just coming into areas and tackling projects like that as part of our one flower bed at a time project. I'm going to show you a different angle of what I'm talking about here. So you can see that it's basically hanging right over this hydrangea. I have some milk jugs there, and I did make a video talking about the winter sowing process. I'll be sure to add links to that down below in case you're interested. I have a number of raised beds here, and to be honest with you, I didn't do a ton with them this year. I did move some strawberries around. There are blueberries in the center of these beds, and we did enjoy the blueberries. We continue to enjoy the strawberries. The strawberries that are in this bed are alpine strawberries. They are super sweet. And when I say sweet, they're just very cute, but they also taste very sweet. And they produce all season long, which I love. Now, this type of strawberry does not send off runners. It basically just clumps. So when you want to divide it, you have to just pull it apart and divide it that way. And let me tell you, I grew these from seed, and I didn't have like a ton of plants. I had enough plants, but like with most strawberries, you end up with a ton of plants over time. It's just a very, very cute little plant. I love it, and it does produce all season long. And look how sweet those are. You can take those and put those like on a salad and just really garnish some meals with these teeny tiny little strawberries. Or you can just pop them in your mouth. This raised bed here had some ranunculus and anemone. They did bloom, but I didn't really video those this season. And I just am leaving the bed as is for right now. And over here are some raspberries that I moved early in the season. They weren't happy with me at the time because it was so hot. So I just need to come in here and just cut back some of the old growth. But that's what you're noticing in this bed here are some raspberry plants. And then these are the strawberries that send off the runners. So this is what I'm talking about, something like this, or these here. And these are a larger variety of strawberries. And I made a video recently showing you my process for taking those runners and propagating in order to get more plants. So be on the lookout for a link to that video down in the description in case you have strawberries and you don't know what to do with them when you see all these runners. Runners equal free plants, and that's a good thing. Seeing that strawberry plants only survive for 3 or 4 years. You always want to be replacing your plants. So in this area here, I have a total of 5 raised beds. These areas will be seeing a lot of changes, and the hope is this year, but I also have a lot of projects on my plate. So we'll see how far we get. So be on the lookout for lots of changes with these beds in the near future. I like to call this flower bed my side walkway flower bed. And it goes through so many changes from spring through the fall. It's very interesting how that works. And you should check out some of my older videos about the daffodils that were blooming in the center here and the dianthus that just put on such a great show after the daffodils went by. This time of year, there are things blooming. There's a little bit of a lull, but not horrible. So like right here, this is a wonderful plant. If you want something tall that blooms in August, that likes wet, then this is a plant for you. And the pollinators love it. It's called Joe Pye weed. And there are different types of Joe Pye weed out there. There are taller varieties, there are shorter varieties. You can see based on the grass that it's next to that this is a taller variety of Joe Pye weed. But this is such a fun plant to add to your landscape. And right next to it is a miscanthus, a type of ornamental grass. Now that miscanthus will be sending feathery type plumes in the fall time. So that's a fun plant to have during the fall months. And if you look this way, you can see a couple of those pots that are on my side porch there, which is a nice view just from this standpoint. And at the base here are some container pots. I like to do a lot with container pots, and you can see I have some eggplant, I have some peppers, lots of fun things happening. Eventually my perennial mums will be blooming. There's one over here. There's an open space here. I recently dug out a Joe Pye weed and a peony. So there will be changes. There always are changes in this particular flower bed because I'm always trying to make it a certain way. I feel like this flower bed, because this is where everyone comes to enter my home, should be a little bit more formal, a little less wild. And every year it turns wild on me. Part of it's because plants drop their seeds. I end up with seedlings in here. And that's fine. It's just, I just need to tackle it each year. And some of the plants that have dropped their seeds include the baptisia. That has a taproot, so that's going to be a beast to dig out. And also another plant that dropped its seeds is the sea holly. I ended up with a ton of baby sea holly plants at the base of this rock. They are pretty. They looked nice, but I mean, they're not meant to be right here in this bed falling over like this. So I will be coming in and I'll be doing a couple of things. I'll be collecting the seeds from them because they are going to seed, and those are great to winter sow. But then I'm also going to be coming in and digging out all of these seedlings. And I plan on moving the sea holly to other areas of my yard. Maybe I'll keep some in here, but I think I'd prefer to have them towards the back side of that bed near the windows. And one of my goals for this year is to dig out this rhododendron. This was here when we bought the house, and for many years, again, I would come in and just cut it back to control its height. But since I don't have a lot of full sun areas in my yard, I want to maximize on those spots where I do get full sun. And this is a full sun bed. So just imagine how much room this plant is taking, or I should call it a shrub. So I'm going to be coming in here with Mr. Budget Gardener, and we're going to be digging that out. That little chipmunk is listening to me. So be on the lookout for a lot of changes that are going to happen in this bed to basically tame the wild. A lot has changed in my garden since my last garden tour. I really hope you enjoyed this video. And until the next video, make it a great day with gardening.